The guard slams Livia against the wall. Her head cracks back against the marble. She doesn't scream. She reaches out. She reaches for her husband. Marcus Severus sits 5 feet away. He sees the blood on her lip. He sees the terror in her eyes. He does not stand up. He does not draw his sword. He picks up a fig. He puts it in his mouth. He bites down. The guard drags Livia by the hair. She claws at the floor. Her fingernails break. The heavy oak doors slam shut. The lock clicks. Livia is gone. Marcus swallows the fruit. He wipes his mouth. He doesn't look at the empty chair. He looks at the emperor. He smiles. He just sold his wife for a tax cut. Welcome to the historical archives. Stop believing the movies. Rome wasn't built on honor. It wasn't built on bravery. It was built on this moment. The moment a husband trades a woman for a favor. I am going to open the ledger of the damned. I will show you the 3 women who paid the debt: Livia, Sabina, and the child bride. And I will show you how the most powerful men in history turned their wives into currency. The books call this the Golden Age. We will call it the slaughter. Let's open the file. It started with a wax tablet. It arrived at the Severus estate at dusk. There was no seal. There was no signature. Just a time. Marcus held the tablet. His hands were cold. He knew what it meant. Every senator knew. To be invited was a trap. To refuse was a death sentence. Livia stood by the window. She saw the messenger waiting. She didn't ask. She went to her room. She put on her best silk. She painted her face. She wasn't dressing for dinner. She was dressing for the slaughter. They walked to the palace in silence. The streets were empty. The city knew. When the palace gates opened, they didn't creak. The hinges were oiled. Everything here was smooth. Too smooth. They entered the banquet hall. The air didn't smell like roasted meat. It smelled of sweat and expensive perfume. Fear has a smell. It smells like sour wine. Marcus took his place on the couch. Livia sat at his feet. This was the custom. But tonight, the custom was a lie. Other men were there, senators, generals, men who killed goals with their bare hands. Now they looked at their laps. They picked at their food. No one spoke. No one laughed. They were waiting for the collector. The servants moved like ghosts. They didn't make a sound. They poured wine without asking. Then, the signal came. A servant stopped behind Marcus. He didn't bow. He leaned down. He whispered one word. Caesar. That was the law. That was the demand. Marcus froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. He looked at Livia. She felt his fear. She touched his hand. It was cold. He pulled his hand away. He broke the contact. He made his choice. He nodded to the servant. Just a small nod. A twitch of the head. That was the signature on the contract. Livia stood up. She didn't scream. Roman women were trained to be statues. She smoothed her dress. She followed the servant. She walked toward the dark corridor at the back of the hall. The corridor had no torches. It was a mouth. She stepped inside. The darkness swallowed her. Marcus stayed on the couch. He was alone. The space beside him was empty. He had to sit there. He couldn't leave. He couldn't eat. He had to wait for his change. The other men watched him. They didn't look him in the eye. They looked at his hands. They checked if he was trembling. If he trembled, he was weak. If he was weak, he was next. So Marcus turned to stone. He stared at a spot on the wall. He counted the bricks. 1, 2, 3. Time stretched. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound was amplified. A cup drop sounded like a sword clash. A cough sounded like a scream. He wondered what was happening in the dark. He tried not to think about it. He thought about his estate. He thought about the lawsuit threatening his land. He thought about his enemies in the Senate. He traded his honor for safety. It was a calculated exchange. The emperor watched from his high couch. He didn't look at the women. He looked at the men. He wasn't stealing wives because he was lustful. He was stealing them because he was testing. He wanted to see who would say no. He wanted to see who would break. Marcus Severus did not break. He bent. He folded like wet paper. An hour passed. The servant returned. He was alone. He refilled Marcus's cup. Then, Livia walked out of the dark. She looked different. Her hair was perfect, too perfect. Her dress was smooth, but her eyes were hollow. The light was gone from them. She walked back to the couch. She sat down. She picked up a grape. She put it in her mouth. She chewed. She swallowed. She didn't look at Marcus. She never looked at him again. The next day, the miracle happened. The lawsuit against Marcus was dropped. His enemy was exiled. His debts were forgiven. The system had paid him. He was rich. He was safe. And he was a coward. The city saw it. They saw the new chariot. They saw the new robes. They knew the price. But no one said a word, because the ledger was open, and the emperor was still hungry. Livia became a ghost in her own home. She stopped speaking. She stopped eating with the family. She spent her days in the garden, staring at the wall. Marcus hired doctors. He bought her jewels. He tried to buy her forgiveness. But you cannot buy what you have sold. She died 2 years later. The doctors said it was a fever. The slaves knew the truth. She simply stopped living. She had been erased in that corridor. Her body just took 2 years to catch up. But Marcus was just the beginning. The palace saw that it worked. They saw that men would trade anything to keep their power. So they refined the system. They made it faster. They made it public. They wanted to see if anyone would fight back. They wanted to find a man with a spine, and they found one. His name was Publius, and his mistake was loving his wife. Not every man was like Marcus. Some men had spines. Some men forgot the rules. They remembered the old Rome, the Rome of iron and blood. Publius Ahenobarbus was one of them. He was old. He was scarred. He had fought in the mud of Germania. He had killed men who were bigger than him. He wasn't afraid of death. He was afraid of dishonor. He brought his wife, Sabina. Sabina was young. She was fierce. She didn't look at the floor like Livia. She looked at the emperor. She looked him in the eye. That was her mistake. The emperor saw her. He stopped drinking. He smiled. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a lamb. He pointed a single finger. The room froze. The servant moved. He glided toward Publius's couch. The sound of chewing stopped. 50 men held their breath. They knew what was coming. They wanted to see if the old soldier would bend. The servant arrived. He leaned down. He whispered the word, "Caesar." Publius didn't look down. He didn't twitch. He looked at the servant's face. "No," Publius said. The word hung in the air. It was heavy. It was a stone dropped in a quiet pond. The servant blinked. He wasn't used to that word. He didn't have a script for, "No, excuse me." The servant asked. "She is tired," Publius said. His voice shook slightly, but it was loud. It echoed off the marble walls. "We are leaving." Publius stood up. He reached for Sabina's hand. He gripped it tight. His knuckles were white. "Come," he said to her. Sabina stood up. She looked hopeful. She thought they were safe. She thought her husband was a hero. She thought the rules didn't apply to brave men. She was wrong. 2 guards stepped out from the shadows. They were Praetorians, the elite. They didn't draw swords. They didn't shout. They just walked. Heavy steps, metal on stone, clank, clank, clank. They stopped in front of Publius. They blocked the exit. They were a wall of iron. One guard placed a hand on Publius's shoulder. It wasn't a friendly touch. It was a clamp. "Sit down," the guard said. It wasn't a request. Publius looked at the guard. He looked at the exit. It was 20 feet away. It might as well have been on the moon. "My wife." Publius started. The guard squeezed. Publius flinched. Old bones ground together. "Sit down." Sabina saw the guard's other hand. It was resting on his dagger. She realized the truth. Publius couldn't save her. He could only die for her. And if he died, she would be taken anyway. She squeezed his hand. She leaned in close. "It's okay," she whispered. She lied. "I will go," she said. "No," Publius said. "If you fight, you die," she whispered. "If I die, you are alone." She let go of his hand. Her fingers slipped away, inch by inch. The friction of skin against skin was the last thing he felt. She stepped back. The guards stepped aside. They made a path, not to the door, to the dark corridor. Sabina walked. She didn't look back. She knew if she looked back, she would run. And if she ran, they would kill him right there on the mosaic floor. She disappeared into the shadow. Publius sat down. He collapsed. The strength left his legs. He put his head in his hands. He wept, not loudly. He didn't scream. He cried quietly into his palms. The other men watched. They didn't pity him. They judged him. He had broken the ritual. He had made it awkward. He had made it real. They hated him for it, because he showed them what they were. Cowards. They looked at their wine. They looked at the ceiling. They pretended not to hear the old soldier crying. Sabina didn't come back that night. The banquet ended. The guests left. They shuffled out quickly. They wanted to go home to their own wives. They wanted to check if they were still there. Publius stayed. He sat on the empty couch. The servants blew out the candles. One by one, darkness filled the room. "Go home," a guard said. "My wife," Publius said. "She is busy." "I will wait." "You will leave." The guard put a hand on his sword hilt. It was the final warning. Publius stood up. He was a broken man. He walked out. He walked home alone. His footsteps echoed in the empty street. He waited by the door for 3 days. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He watched the road. On the 4th day, a carriage arrived. It was black, no markings. The door opened. Sabina stepped out. She was wearing new clothes, expensive silk, gold bracelets on her wrists. Payment. She walked past Publius. She didn't speak. She didn't touch him. She walked into the house. She went straight to the bath. She ordered the slaves to bring boiling water. She scrubbed her skin. She scrubbed until she bled. Publius stood in the doorway. "Sabina?" he asked. She didn't answer. She stared at the water. The water turned pink with blood. She was trying to wash the palace off her skin. But the palace stains deep. It stains the soul. Publius went to the Senate the next day. He was angry. He was desperate. He tried to speak. He tried to raise emotion. He wanted justice. He stood up in the chamber. The emperor. He started. The room went cold. 50 men turned to look at him. Their eyes were glass. They weren't looking at a senator. They were looking at a ghost. A man stood up across the room. It was Marcus Severus, the man who sold his wife first. "Sit down, Publius," Marcus said. "You are ill." "I am not ill," Publius shouted. "I am a Roman." "You are tired," Marcus said. "Go home." It was a warning. It was a threat. Publius looked around. No one supported him. No one met his gaze. They had all signed the ledger. They were all complicit. If Publius spoke, they all looked guilty. So they silenced him. Not with knives. With silence. With isolation. Publius sat down. He never spoke in the Senate again. He died 6 months later. The doctors said his heart stopped. The truth was simpler. The system erased him. But the system wasn't done. It had broken the coward. It had broken the soldier. Now it wanted something else. It wanted a trophy. It didn't just want to borrow wives. It wanted to keep them. It wanted to put them on display. Enter Claudia Rufina. She wasn't just a wife. She was a symbol. And her husband was about to learn a new lesson. The lesson was this: you don't own anything. Not your land, not your name. Not the woman sleeping in your bed. The palace is the only owner. And the rent is due. The palace refined its methods. Borrowing wives was messy. Returning them was awkward. It was cleaner to keep them. It was cleaner to erase the husband completely. But not by killing him. Killing a man makes him a martyr. Taking his wife and making him watch. That makes him a joke. Enter Claudia Rufina. She was beautiful. But that wasn't why the emperor wanted her. He wanted her because she was proud. She was the wife of Valerius. Valerius was a rising star. He was young. He was ambitious. He thought he was part of the inner circle. He was wrong. He was just another supplier. The summons didn't come at night. It came during the day. It came to the Senate. Valerius was giving a speech. He was talking about grain prices. A guard walked onto the Senate floor. He handed Valerius a note. Valerius stopped speaking. He read the note. The emperor requests the company of Claudia Rufina. Immediately, Valerius looked up. 300 senators were watching. They knew the note. They knew the look on his face. Valerius had a choice. Finish the speech or rush home. He folded the note. He put it in his pocket. He finished the speech. He chose his career over his wife. He went home an hour later. The house was empty. The servants were crying. Claudia was gone. Valerius sat in the atrium. He waited for her to come back. He waited for the loan to end. She didn't come back in 3 days. She didn't come back in a week. 2 weeks later, Valerius was invited to a banquet. He had to go. To refuse was treason. He walked into the hall. He saw the emperor on the high couch, and next to him sat Claudia. She wasn't wearing her own clothes. She was wearing imperial purple. She wasn't crying. She was pouring wine. She was laughing at the emperor's jokes. Valerius stopped. The room spun. He took a step forward. "Claudia," he whispered. She looked up. She looked right at him. Her eyes were cold. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She looked through him. Like he was a piece of furniture. Like he was a ghost. The emperor saw Valerius. He raised his cup. "Valerius," he shouted, "your wife tells excellent stories." The room erupted in laughter. The senators laughed. The generals laughed. They weren't laughing at the joke. They were laughing at Valerius. They were laughing because they were glad it wasn't them. Valerius stood there. He had to smile. He had to bow. He had to thank the emperor for the compliment. He did it. He bowed. He smiled. He died inside. Claudia never went home. She stayed in the palace. Valerius saw her at every banquet. He watched her fade. He watched her turn into a doll. He watched her become part of the furniture. He never spoke to her again. He lived for 40 more years. He died a rich man. But he was never a husband again. The system was perfect now. It had taken fear. It had taken pride. Now it wanted to take hope. It wanted to destroy the future. It went after a wedding. The victim was Tullia. She was 16. She was innocent. She was marrying a boy named Gaius. It was a love match, rare in Rome. The families were happy. The feast was loud. There was music. There was dancing. The doors burst open. The music stopped. The dancers froze. 4 guards marched in. They weren't wearing dress uniforms. They were wearing combat gear. They pushed guests aside. They kicked over tables. Wine spilled like blood on the floor. They walked up to the head table. Gaius stood up. He was young. He was stupid. He laughed. He thought it was a prank. He thought his friends had hired actors. "Who sent you?" he asked. The lead guard didn't answer. He backhanded Gaius across the face. The sound was like a whip crack. Gaius fell. His nose was broken. Blood poured onto his white tunic. The guests screamed. The guard grabbed Tullia. She was wearing her bridal veil. It was flame-colored, the symbol of joy. The guard wrapped his fist in the veil. He dragged her. "No!" Gaius shouted. He tried to stand up. He tried to fight. The other 3 guards fell on him. They didn't use swords. They used boots. They kicked him in the ribs. They kicked him in the head. They kicked him until he stopped moving. Tullia reached out. Her fingers brushed her mother's hand. Her mother pulled back. Her mother was terrified. She let her daughter go. She let the wolf take the lamb. The guards dragged Tullia out. She was screaming. She was calling for her father. Her father was under a table, hiding. The party didn't end. The guards left. Gaius lay on the floor, bleeding, moaning. The guests stood up. They didn't help him. They didn't chase the guards. They looked at each other. They looked at the door. They left. One by one, they ran away from the bad luck. They ran away from the truth. Gaius was left alone in the wreckage of his wedding. The next day, a messenger arrived at Gaius's house. He was lying in bed, bandaged, broken. The messenger read a decree. "The marriage is annulled." "On what grounds?" Gaius whispered. "On the grounds that the bride is now under imperial protection." Protection. That was the word they used. Not stolen, not raped. Protection. Gaius tried to sue. He went to the courts. The judge laughed at him. "You should be grateful," the judge said. "The emperor has blessed your family." Gaius went mad. He walked the streets screaming. He shouted the truth in the forum. He shouted that the emperor was a thief. The people walked past him. They didn't listen. They didn't want to hear. Eventually, the guards came for him again. They didn't take him to the palace. They took him to the rock. They threw him off the Tarpeian rock. The execution for traitors. His body lay at the bottom of the cliff, broken, twisted. No one buried him. Tullia was seen a month later. She was at the games. She was sitting in the imperial box. She was wearing gold. She was staring at the sand. She didn't flinch when the lions ate the prisoners. She didn't flinch when the blood splattered. She was already dead. Her body was just waiting to fall down. This was the system. It didn't just kill people. It killed ideas. It killed the idea of marriage. It killed the idea of safety. It killed the idea that no was a word you could say. Livia, Sabina, Claudia, Tullia, they weren't just women. They were bricks. Bricks in the wall of a new Rome. A Rome where the only law was the whim of one man, and the only currency was flesh. The emperor thought he had won. He thought he was a god. He thought the system would protect him forever. He was wrong. Because you can only push a man so far. You can only steal so many wives. Eventually, the bill comes due, and the payment is always blood. The end didn't come with a bang. It came in a tunnel. The emperor was walking between the games and the palace. He was sweating. He was happy. He had just watched a man die in the sand. He turned a corner. The guards were waiting. These weren't the guards who dragged the women. These were the guards who kept the books. They didn't salute. They drew swords. The emperor stopped. He laughed. He thought it was a joke. "I am a god," he said. The first blade went into his neck. The god blood, just like the gladiator. They stabbed him 30 times. They hacked at his face. They erased him. But they didn't do it for Livia. They didn't do it for Sabina. They didn't do it for the child bride Tullia. They did it because the emperor had become bad for business. He was too loud. He was too messy. The system needed silence, so the system cut out the tongue. When the news hit the streets, the people cheered. They tore down his statues. They melted his coins. But what happened to the women? Did Valerius run to the palace to save Claudia? Did the families come for their daughters? No. Claudia was found in a room. She was sitting in the dark. She didn't know who she was anymore. She was returned to her family. They didn't welcome her. They hid her. She was a stain on their honor. She was a reminder of their cowardice. She spent the rest of her life in a villa by the sea. She never married again. She never spoke again. The women were the wreckage. Rome just sailed on. A new emperor took the throne. He was quieter. He was smarter. He didn't steal wives at banquets. He bought them with laws. He bought them with contracts. He made the horror legal. And the husbands. They lined up to shake his hand. The historical archives are closing. But before you leave, look around. Look at the world you live in. You think the palace is a ruin. You think the marble columns fell down. Look closer. The architecture changed. The marble became glass. The tunics became suits. The wax tablet became the non-disclosure agreement. The logic is exactly the same. Powerful men still take what they want. The system still protects them. We see it in the news every day. The settlement, the private island, the executive assistant. These are the new codes. We watch the news. We see the victims. And what do? Do we stand up? Do we draw swords? Or do we do what Marcus Severus did? Do we look at the screen, take a sip of our drink, and look away because it's not our wife? It's not our daughter. Not yet. The Emperor Caligula is dead. His body rotted 2,000 years ago. But the ghost is still hungry. It is still in the boardroom. It is still in the hotel suite. It is waiting for the nod. The guard is still standing by the door. He is waiting for you to look down. He is waiting for you to take the deal. Rome didn't fall. It just changed its name. And somewhere, right now, a door is locking, a woman is screaming, and a man is checking his bank account to make sure the payment cleared. The file is closed, but the transaction is eternal.